Yeah.
Tell us about finding material, because obviously so many literary classics that you adapted, but a lot of very different work.
And if you think about it, most of the things we've done have been either 2 or 3 writers, and that's it. I mean, it would be several books by a writer. And we didn't go after many, many different writers. I mean, we had our favorites, like Ian Forster, and to some extent Henry James, and there were one or 2 others, but we kept to their books, developed those. It's not like we were out to, just because it was a book, it was worth making into a movie. It had to be something that was right for us.
Well, there was a comment in the Merchant Ivory documentary that when it came down to the decision making, you were the president, Ismail was the Congress, and Ruth was the Supreme Court.
Right. That was it.
So tell us a little bit about that relationship.
It wasn't until both of them died in our lives as well.
So what would you say was the biggest creative difference that Ruth had to step in and make the ultimate call on?
And do what?
And make the judgment call on.
Well,
say, in terms of like picking a project. Sometimes things weren't quite okay. For instance, with Ian Forster, it occurred to Ruth quite early on that really Ian Forster wasn't so interested in the downtrodden people of this world that we assumed he was. He was much more at home and happier if he could be with educated upper middle class people. She saw that. Now, if you were making a film of one of his books in which there were the downtrodden, I may use that word, it's a terrible word, but you know what I mean. If there were people from working class people, the characters were valid characters and very useful to the story. She found a way to develop them, and she made them interesting. With the other major thing about Ishmael that we hear a lot about is his incredible magic as a fundraiser, and I feel like even in your years of great success, you still hear that he's making things sort of manifest out of thin air. So tell us a little bit about his.
It wasn't quite thin air, though.
No. I mean, I'm exaggerating, but obviously. Tell us about his fundraising abilities, which seem mythical.
Well, sometimes it would be a matter of years, but he would spot people who might, in some circumstances, be willing to finance a movie. And when the right time came, and for the right person, he would leap in a way and convince that person that, yeah, I always wanted to, make that too. I mean, that was his attitude. Just he wasn't afraid. He just jumped in. Always.
Was there one film that was particularly hard to get financed?
I'd say they all were.
Even Remains of the Day?
Not Remains of the Day. No. Well, it also Remains of the Day because someone else wanted to make it. Someone else had the rights to it. But then they got sort of bored somehow, didn't want to do it. I remember when we had just finished Howard's End, I think, and someone came up to me at a party and said, I've just read this book I have and I want to give it to you. Here it is. It was a paperback book. He said, here it is. And I think this has really bored the hell out of me, but you'd probably like it. And it was Remains of the Day. So I took it and took it home and read it over the weekend. And yeah, I thought this was the most wonderful book, and it would make a fantastic movie.
When Howard's End first came out, I think it played at the Art House where I grew up for maybe over a year. I mean, it was a really successful film. And I'm curious if that sort of allowed you from that point forward a little bit more
of I guess of some freedom with the stories you wanted to tell, that there were more opportunities?
Well, whatever film we made, we wanted to make. I mean, we weren't really looking around for a story. Well, yeah, we would find stories. Or someone would, in fact, give us a novel, like Evan Cannell. You've just seen Mr. and Mrs. Bridge. Well, I mean, because Ruth also loved those novels. And then one time I was asked to dinner, and Paul Newman was there. And after the dinner, and Joanne was going to do Mrs. Bridge for TV. And she was talking about it, but we thought that was a terrible idea. Why waste it on TV? And why not combine the two, Mrs. Bridge and Mr. Bridge, and make one film? And we were talking about this. We'd had dinner with Paul Newman. Somehow the subject came up of Mrs. Bridge. And I said, well, we really love, what we want to do is make Mr. and Mrs. Bridge. And then Paul Newman said immediately, and I'd be Mr. Bridge. Well, when he said that, it came about. Many things were like that.
Were the two novels sort of different points of view of the same events, or were they sort of sequentially different?
They were quite different, yeah. The characters were often the same. I mean, Mrs. Bridge was always Mrs. Bridge, and Mr. Bridge the same, and the children, and so on. They didn't change, but yeah, there were different situations, sure.
I've heard you say that this film is, sort of touches on a lot of things that you feel a personal connection to from like growing up in the U.S. Tell us about wanting to make a film in the Midwest. It's a very obviously change of scenery from some of the prior
From Oregon.
Yeah.
I'm from Oregon.
Yeah.
And well, I as a family, the British family was quite like my own family, and I could appreciate these similarities, and it intrigued me and made me. I mean, if I hadn't grown up in Klamath Falls, Oregon, I don't suppose I would have been so keen on Mr. and Mrs. Bridge. I've been in the same kind of family, but as the Bridge family. But that's what happens.
The ending of the film is really unique, and I don't think I've seen too many films where the resolution of the drama is done in an end title, in terms of the action in the sequence. Tell us about how you landed on that.
People came along and said that we had to listen to, and we respected. And he said, you can't just have Mrs. Bridge die, freeze to death in the car and die. That's not a way to end a movie. That's the way to end the book. Well, yeah, I mean, we assume that she freezes to death there in the book. And so we came up with that in fact, she doesn't freeze to death and she's rescued. I mean, just wanted to say those things. not let people wonder what had happened to poor Mrs. Bridge. But in that scene in the film where Paul is driving along and singing, he's driving the car, and I was in the back of the car down where you couldn't see, the camera couldn't see me. I was kind of on the floor of the back seat of the car while Paul was singing. We had many takes of that. And I'll never forget that.